Maybe a very quick standard. Kotlin is a programming language created by JetBrains. JetBrains is also the company behind IntelliJ, the IDE. So it's highly recommended to use IntelliJ IDEA, the Ultimate Edition, to write Kotlin code. And before I give you a couple of code samples and show you what can be done, some configs. First of all, I would check to have the Kotlin plugin enabled. It's a standard plugin, but that's very important. We also use a lot of Cato, so that might make sense to install and activate. And I'm a big fan of knowing your shortcuts. So the key prompter X plugin is very recommended. If you have done that, we use Kotlin 2.0 and they wrote new compiler basically. And to enable that in IntelliJ, you need to go into the Kotlin settings and enable K2 mode. It's better, but if you don't use that, it kind of creates some problems with the way your linter works and the way your language server works. So you will not get great insights about your actual code. I would highly recommend enabling that. Other than that, a couple of shortcuts. Double shift, you can search everywhere. You can do every task here. It's very helpful. Highly recommended using it. Command E, or you can see my Windows keys down here if you have any questions on what's on Windows. Also highly recommended, you can see your latest code files. You can also have a couple of other things on the side. For example, let's go into some code. And I have this Kotlin code. I'm new to Kotlin. But I know Java. So let's just write bytecode here. And I can see the Kotlin bytecode right away. I'm not really good with bytecode, but I can decompile it. And I can see how this would look like in Java. It's pretty accurate. Sure, some metadata information that Kotlin compiler will add is not really needed, but this is also a great way to learn what Kotlin actually does if you work on the JVM. And it's wide accessible in Command E. Just write bytecode, and then that's it. Now, this is a bit small. I'm present. There's so much stuff going on here. I don't like it. Let's do double shift and enter the district tree mode. Now, pretty much everything is gone, but I want my sidebar. I want to see my files. So I press Command 1 and it would swipe back here. If I want to search for a file directly, for example, imports, I can do that and it will show up. If I don't like that sidebar, I can again press Alt 1 or Command 1 and it's gone. Now, I'm still presenting, and this is still very small. So instead of going into the district tree mode, I will enter the presentation mode. And now you can see a lot more. Good. So now I'm in the wrong file. I don't want to start here. So let's go back to the main and style Java. I expected you know a little bit about Kotlin, that you might also work with Java in the past. And I just want to focus on what I saw were common mistakes, and that could just be simpler, be written better. This is totally fine. This will create your main function that will run hello world, and your path will be Wolt main Java style. Totally fine, no problems. You can run this main function. But in Kotlin, you can also have high order top level functions in this case. So you can just write a main. You can also add some args here if you really need them. And that will create pretty much the same structure. The only difference is this file is called Kotlin main. And normally if I just disable this tag and we decompile it to Java, then we can see it again very well. It will have the name of the file and the KT on it. That's every single time you have a Kotlin file that is not just one class, but is high order functions. If I want to change that, I can just add this file JvmName, and it must be at the top for the package. And if I want to decompile again, you will see the name changed. So if you somewhere need to add the main class name, just keep that in mind if you switch to this side. But it's a lot shorter, and you can also just use the KT version, and you don't need all this JVM static objects. You can just leave that out. So a little bit of small code improvements. But let's go into the more interesting stuff. I saw that we had names, classes with names models from different places, and sometimes they just have the same name. So if I have a user and it comes from a package that I don't control, I can import it. But if I have two different classes that are both called user and they work differently, that are imported somewhere else, I need to add like all the package. To avoid that, you can just do another import and then say as whatever name you want. And this is a lot shorter, a lot better, especially if you use it multiple times, especially if you have it as parameters for functions. So don't do this, do this. Good. Maybe extension function, expressions. So one good thing in Kotlin is, unlike Java, if, else, when, they're all expressions, they're not statements. So you don't need to say, hey, if var x, let's say var x is 1, and you want to change that. Normally in Java, you would need to do something here, like very, very common. Multiple lines, it's just a mess, because every single statement here is its own thing. It has like a semicolon in Java, and will just not work. The good thing in Kotlin is this is an expression. I can just say x is gleich this. Maybe instead of relying on x in this case, I just say true, and then I don't need to say x again. I can just return it in here. I can also get rid of the brackets and all. Yeah, simple. And what's the good thing about this? This is also be able to use in, for example, print function. So I can just write the if statement here. I can write a when statement here. And yeah, good to know. One thing that I saw some people do in Kotlin is they have like some nullable type. And they want to do an if on it, but they also kind of don't really want to deal with the null. So they use this extension function. Take if, it's from the Kotlin stable, from the Kotlin standard library. One good thing is you can always look into it, how it's implemented, and understand it from scratch. This is just some contract for the compiler. The problem with this is it has so many subtasks. I don't really like it. I think just use if. It's very simple. It will not kill you. Kotlin extension functions are nice, but in this case, it's too much. Then, now we're getting to the good stuff. Let's start with null first. Dealing with null is always an issue. Let's say I have actor DBO, so some database, I don't know if it's null, if it's there, it's Mongo. I have a name and I have age, I hope. I really need them, but if I request them for the database, they can be there, they cannot be. So now let's run this. These are 4 different options to deal with now. Number 1 is to use the double exclamation mark from Kotlin. I don't really like double exclamation mark. Why? Because if you look at the error, it will give you a null pointer exception. It will do the same thing in Java if you just normally call it. And you don't really get much information. Like, I don't know, is name null, is age null? No clue. Need to find out. Can be very difficult if it's a distributed system. Not nice. But luckily, there are better options. There's, for example, version number 2. Let's go to version number 2. Here I explicitly say, okay, hey, if this is null, then do this. This is a nothing type, so every exception is a nothing type, so Kotlin will know if this once the code breaks down, and everything else will work. I also don't like this because, yeah, throwing an exception like that, very, very long. But the good thing is, now I can click here, I see, okay, it's age is required, I know what went wrong. Improvement. But we can do better. We can just say, hey, v3 is an error. Error is a function from the standard Kotlin library. It just throws the illegal state exception. It's nice and tidy, makes the code a bit better. But we can do better. There is the required not null function, and you can just run it like this with nothing, or you can add a lambda with a message that will run if something went wrong. Earlier we had the illegal argument exception here in the error. This is intended for basically getting stuff like this, getting parameters in. Then it's perfect. Highly recommended to use it like that. Because it throws a illegal argument exception here, number 4. Yeah. The other one, the error for the illegal state exception. Also, to show in IntelliJ, here we require the not null. This is clearly null. But here it knows if it's down here, it can't be null. So it marks me this as yellow. So I know, hey, I can get rid of it. It even will say remove unnecessary non-null assertion, which is also nice. So highly recommended to use IntelliJ. But best way, number 5, in my opinion, is just have the illegal state exception in most cases, and then we can just have a checkNotNull. It's also from the standard library. You can have a look at it. And you can just put it in the parameter and it will handle everything. If I click on it, I see, yeah, H, here's my error. I see H is required. So instead of having this standard Kotlin non-null exception, non-null assertion, don't use this, use this. Or if you have parameters, use the requireNotNull. It will make debugging a lot easier. And we are going to the last stop. Running fast. Maybe, yeah. Here I needed to create like some classes, just to give you an example. It's about extension functions, high order extension functions. I love them. How do I start? I start with, this is the normal way how, let's say, a Java developer would write a function. They have like a user object and they want to know, can this be deleted? So I create a function, can be deleted, it takes a user object, and then I do something and I return a Boolean. This you can ignore. But Kotlin has a very, very powerful construct, and these are these extension functions. You can have a class name or interface, and then you can extend that with, for example, can delete. This is just from the user, it can also just be left out, and it works very well, especially if you need to change things. Here above, you can see a couple of examples. Like, you can write code like this, it's no problem. But if you have multiple functions that need to change something, if you have like a map and a map and a map, this gets very tiring. And the very, very good thing about extension functions is if I have a user object and now I'm programming, I know, okay, user has a role, it has a full name, it has a can delete. Oh, that's exactly what I needed. If I don't have that, I don't know that the can delete is there. Like, I need to know, okay, can delete is existing somewhere. And worst case scenario, if you have it in some other Java-like class, then I need to know utils can delete user. And these utils can have a million different names, and you just need to know, otherwise you can't find it. With extension functions, you just have whatever object you have, and you can call it. This we just call this function, this has permission, we just call this, and then we have the normal role and do a normal contains. on it. Now that I see we have a contains here, then let's not go into that. So this is highly recommended to use. This not recommended. Don't do this style. The only type I would use this style is if I have some override. If I have an interface that I implement and it overrides a function, then that might make sense. But generally, I do highly recommend using extension functions. They will make it very easy to see what somebody can do. It also exists in properties, because properties in Kotlin have three things. They have a getter, a setter, and a field, and you can override them. Having the field as an extension function is not really feasible because the data needs to be stored somewhere, but you can just have some external place, can be even in a totally different library, and you can override it. You can also do a set that would take a value, and then autocomplete is good. Split it into parts and sets the real stuff. Now, okay, the real stuff is not editable, but if it would be possible. Yeah. Another thing that's good about Kotlin is there's plus signs that are just implemented as operators. I don't know why I can't go to the delegation right now, but let's just don't take care of that. What I also saw in the real world is we have like a rule that returns a when, and it's just very tiresome because, to be honest, you can just write it like this. And if you write it like this, it's first of all shorter, and second of all, you can also get rid of the string because it can be just easily identified. Bit shorter, bit nice. If you have only one line that returns it, you can write code like that. Here at the bottom are some real-world examples. I removed the types and the real code, but this is how it can look like. So, for example, we had this map issuer data, then we got an issuer that was nullable, and it returned the party. It's okay, it works, but it's a lot easier if I have an issuer and then I just say to party. No, now my presentation mode doesn't want to let me show the code. Yeah, okay. It's that simple. Especially if you need to chain multiple things together. Kotlin uses it all the time, everywhere. This is not a good example, but all the let, all the take ifs, all the maps, they're all just like that. Very simply implemented, but it's a very, very strong concept in Kotlin. And I would highly, highly recommend taking some time for that. Maybe before I wrap this up and let you ask questions, I just look at my own notes. Yeah, if you have an IntelliJ account, I would highly recommend using the settings sync. Because if you don't only program on one laptop or you want to keep your data over time, it's just very easy to sync your JetBrains account and sync all the data. You can also go into code styles, and right now I use a personal code style that I changed over years to just no code style. It's called code schemas. Color schemas. Yeah. You can basically change everything. For example, what I changed is the non-null assertion. For me, it's red because I don't like it. I want to clearly see it. You can go into that, play with it. It's very nice if you change this stuff up to your liking over time. Other than that, a little bit off topic, but still worth talking about is the Pastebot. That is a totally different software. It's for macOS. It's also highly recommended to buy. I think it's like $30, $40 once. It basically gives you a clipboard that doesn't only have the latest clipboard, but it has all the history for the past, which is great because then you can copy and paste multiple things at once and totally change the way I work. And it's highly recommended, and I should update it. Good. That was it so far already. So I will stop sharing and see if there are any questions.